That was good.
Yeah. No.
You ready, Mr. Dakota?
Yeah, if you want.
What did you say, Miss Page?
Yeah, here. It's safe. I got a quarter past, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome all. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the July 8th, 2020 Executive Committee meeting for PlanRVA. I want to welcome everybody and thank everybody for attending. At this time, if you could help us with the roll call and application.
Sure. Charles City County, Mr. Coda.
Here?
Chesterfield County, Mr. Winslow.
Here.
City of Richmond, Dr. Hugo.
Here.
Richland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Davis.
Here.
Henrico County, Reverend Nelson. Unicoi County, Mrs. Page.
Here.
Palatine County, Mr. Byerly.
Here.
Town of Ashland, Dr. LeBron.
Here.
We have a forum.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. There are some coffee, donuts, bagels. Get your carb load on, water, please help yourself as we go through. At this time, we'll go through the meeting. We will hopefully get a chance to review the meeting minutes, and I'll entertain a motion to accept them to the record.
Mr. Chair. Second.
Okay, there goes Mr. Davis. Thank you, Mrs. Page. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none? Go votes. So moved. This is a pretty special group, and I just want to thank everybody for this year. It was probably one of the biggest growth years for me. I've never been chair of anything before. One of the things I've always learned, both in my military career and my professional career, is that teams really can come together during adversity. And how do I put this? We had a lot of opportunity to come together. I had a lot of leadership positions over my career in military. But in all those positions, I always had senior commander, a boss, HR department I could go to when things came up. But I can't tell you, there are times this year when I stood in my home office, emphasis on home, looking at the phone going, gosh, this needs to get escalated. But I was the escalation point. That's never happened to me before. There's an old saying that it's lonely at the top. But thanks to all of the people around this table, I never once felt lonely. I never felt, it's been rare that I felt so supported by a group that I didn't know really well. When I started this, Martha asked me, she said, what are your goals for this year as chair? I'm like, I thought you had goals. Who's supposed to bring goals to this meeting? It's like a potluck and we didn't bring the main course. But my main goal really, hopefully for the region, but also selfishly, was to get to know everybody. I've just been elected. This wasn't something I've been planning on doing for years, so kind of got very new to this, and I figured, building relationships, learning, as well as really, valuing regional cooperation. I'm not sure Goochland has embraced that as much, and I really wanted to try to change that. So I thank you for that. In the next meeting, I'll talk about some of our accomplishments, because it's been a tremendous year. But I just want to say thanks. This was above and beyond what I expected in a positive way. I appreciate all the late night phone calls, I don't know how many times I was on the phone with Chris as he's putting his kids to bed. But he does tell great story bedtime. So if you ever got a little time, just ask Chris. So I did want to thank some of our leadership team, Mr. Holland. I learned a lot more about finance than I ever really wanted to learn. I learned a lot from Mr. Davey about setting up a marketing bench. Obviously, Mr. Gregory, I say this in the next meeting too. I've never had so many conversations with an attorney, and I've been through a divorce. So, and then obviously Martha, who really took me under her wings as executive director, and just set a very high bar for the next positions I had. So I know I'm leaving you guys in great hands. Everybody around this table has pitched in on time. I just really appreciate it. So spoons out. Spoons up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, still, but I think everyone in this room really feels a sense that you set a standard of leadership this year during a tough time for the world. Look at that, and I'll have some extended comments for regular meeting. I just want to say we all appreciate you, we appreciate all the appreciate the staff, and this is a special group of people. And I know that your engagement future to help us be better as evidenced by our new bill and by Reverend Nelson. So with that, I'm going to kick this gently over to Martha for our version 2.0 conversation.
Thank you. Yes, so this is an addition to your agenda after the mail out happened. I think we got it earlier this week. This is a proposal that we have requested from Baskerville. This is our team that we recruited last year. As many of you remember, the finance committee, maybe 2 years ago, went through a process to select tenant advisor services through Cushman Wakefield Tallheimer, and Brian Berkey has been the lead point on that. Then last summer, he and I worked together to interview and select Baskerville as the design team to help us think about our space needs, to conduct a needs assessment, and then to be able to really help us evaluate and develop a space program for what we would need in any future leasing situation. All of this has been driven by our lease expiration for the current space that we occupy in October of 2022. And so under the original engagement that you all approved last year, Baskerville did some survey work with staff, just did some basic kind of number crunching, space planning, according to how many people do we have, how many people do we expect to have, what are those space needs, how many meetings do you host, all those kinds of things. All of that work kicked off at the beginning and in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic and the remote situation. So we've learned a lot, definitely, over the last several months. And so I think as conversations have continued with the finance committee and members of the executive committee about this, we felt like it would be a good idea to bring Baskerville back in and actually do some work with you all as executive committee members and really envisioning I think really honing in on, what are your expectations? How do you envision the commission? What presence should we have in the community? How does that relate? There's a component of this proposal that then can come back around and work with staff on sort of the, what does staff need? But I think really we wanted it in light of the community engagement strategy, in light of the discussions that we've had with the finance committee, just really be able to bring this opportunity. So this is a scope of work that is in part here before you to authorize. We budgeted for it, but as part of the budget action, the board, the idea was that the executive committee would authorize any commitment of funds in this particular area of focus. So it's budgeted, but it needs to be approved once we move forward. And then also it would be, I think, if we were open to accepting the scope of work, it would be a commitment of your time to participate in that workshop. So I'll kind of take a pause there and answer your comment or their questions.
Any questions? Things have changed a lot in years. Certainly to the extent we can all get part of that conversation. Such a physical change would affect all of us. As well as staff, obviously. Is there a motion to authorize executive director to execute the scope of work and schedule a work session for executive committee members with invitation of committee chairs?
So favor?
Aye. Opposed, like sign. And now we're on to key imperatives.
This is next in your packet. This format should look familiar to you by now. This is a first run to be able to share the key imperatives with you. I mean, this is truly representative of the handoff from Chairman Howard to Chairman Chairman Elected. And really being able to identify and articulate what are those main objectives for the organization. Certainly, we have a lot of activity going on. Our work program is the full detail of what's happening in each program and that kind of thing. But one of the things that Mr. Spoonhour challenged me to work on last year was really kind of boiling that up. You know, what are the one page, kind of really high level things that we're driving toward. And so this is before you today for not action, but really just to be able to receive and absorb and give me some feedback. The idea will be that once the executive committee is comfortable, if you would recommend to the full commission, and this would be the agenda, if you will. And I think really, in many respects, I would personally interpret this as the guidepost for setting the expectations for my performance. So and certainly the agency overall. So and each of the slides that follow gives the detail. And I can, as you know, I can talk all day about this stuff, but imperative one, preserving our financial position. Obviously that has been and will continue to be a key focus of our organization. Certainly because of the positive turn that we have made and the positive strides. By no means do we want to rest on our elbows there and want to keep this at the focus of the organization. So obviously we want to drive to a successful audit for this fiscal year that just ended June 30th. We really want to make sure that we've got our established finance team in place and that is not an area that we want to see any sort of lacking capacity. So that's a key priority. And then, building really a dynamic financial reporting system. So finance committee has been a dedicated group. Mr. Holland has given us a lot of suggestions for how we could be more robust in our reporting and more transparent in that. And so we're going to be working on that this year. I would be remiss if I didn't say that certainly financial management software is something that has been talked about in the finance committee. I think, both Dan Van Doren and I feel strongly that could be something that could be really helpful to us. But before we come to you with a request to make that kind of investment, we need to know what we want to get out of a system like that. And so that ROI is going to be really important. So managing core operations, obviously, we need to make sure that we uphold the standard of all of our federal grant programs. The federal certification for the TPO is scheduled for the summer, highest priority for us. Fulfilling those work program priorities and the objectives of our funding, to make sure that sustainability of revenue is there for us is really important. And making sure that with gratitude to you all for not only agreeing to, but really being supportive of these new positions is really critical to that capacity of our staff and being able to move the work program forward. Imperative 3 is really about, I think, making this commission valuable to our member jurisdictions and driving that, from a relevance perspective. I mean, certainly from a financial perspective, building demand for services is good, but at the end of the day, we exist to serve our 9 member jurisdictions, and I think we have a lot of opportunity to grow in that area. And so, we want to make sure that it's very clear to all of you what the opportunities are that you can take advantage of from the capacity and the expertise and the skill set of our staff, but also to be able to make sure that those that are working every day in your jurisdictions understand that and really know that. And so that's a relationship building component, it's an information and education component, and it's really making sure that when the phone rings here, we have an attitude of readiness, and I think come from a place of yes, and it might be when, but I think we really want to be at that phone call that there's confidence that we're going to be here to support the jurisdictions. Imperative 4, we've got some pretty exciting things happening in the region. And so many of you have been involved in forming those opportunities, so I don't need to educate you on that. But, you know, obviously the Regional Response Fund was a born out of necessity, but it's a really, I think, exciting partnership in the Emergency Management Alliance and how they've really led being able to be really creative and mobilizing community resources at, you know, really hard times. You know, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority is continuing to evolve and you know, grow and really kind of get its organizational lesson. It's been exciting for our staff to be a part of that. We continue as we anxiously await the release of the census. You know, our regional indicators project has been on hold since 2018. So definitely an objective to bring that back. And we've got a lot of opportunity to be able to leverage some partnerships so that we don't have to do that alone, but really be aligned with, you know, how do we move this region forward and measure our success and progress and focus on where we need to move. That's in alignment with the code requirements for the Planning District Commission. Each Planning District Commission is required in code to prepare a regional strategic plan. And so that indicators component is really important in that, because the code is pretty explicit about, you know, being able to measure progress over time. And then finally, you know, we've had an emphasis the last few years in growing our emergency management and environmental programs, and our staff members, Katie Ruby and Sarah Stewart, really just done a phenomenal job in seeking out new grant opportunities. I think year over year, Sarah has not only written, but has successfully applied for new grant funding to grow that environmental program. And our emergency management applications were up to 8 that have been submitted on behalf of our 25 member jurisdictions. We serve as the fiscal agent. That those programs are driven by the local emergency management community, but it's probably grown about $200,000 that we're able to bring into the region over the last 2 years. So it's just really exciting. And then finally, you know, we've got this imperative 5 really about kind of these special priorities that are before us this year. Developing that physical presence aligns with our mission. It's a lot about the space planning and making sure that not only do we have an adequate space to host meetings like this and our commission meeting, and for our staff to work effectively, but as we live into this community engagement plan, we make sure that members of the public not only have access virtually, but have access to be here in the room and to be, you know, present for the activities that are happening. And I would say, as you know, we have on the target too, there are some organizational improvements that kind of need to happen in conjunction with that. So we have an opportunity this year to really look hard at making sure that our organization has the right combination for recruitment and retention of benefits, but also the right combination of benefits to meet our financial circumstances. So there's a balance there, and we really need to make sure that we're focused on keeping that balance. So I'll stop there. There's obviously a lot in the slides that follow, but definitely an interest in not just today, but in the coming weeks on feedback and input on this. There's missing.
Oh,
we were
no,
excited about.
thank you, Martha. No, I'm excited. This is a meaty sandwich. As you all can see, there's a lot going on just within our organization. I'm sure each of us can find things that we drill down more. So this is really supposed to be informational today, sort of a digestion moment for all of us. And then this will come back in front of us next month if there's questions. If there's questions now, I want to make sure we have that opportunity. Yes.
Sure. Well, first of all, I commend folks who worked on this. It obviously appears that the imperatives are a priority for them. So I think that's smart. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 being where it is, and 2 being where it is. I did have a question, interestingly enough, about imperative 3, I guess, item C, talks about increasing engagement. So I read that as obviously internally with the commissioners. I guess my question was, there was talk last year and then things kind of got sideways. Does that include engagement with maybe us going out, us as a body, to some of the localities telling localities what we do. I know in some other areas, different regional bodies will come and kind of tell people what they're doing, whether it's JSAR or just a number of folks come out. You know, Dan Schmidt, and I don't say this in any derogatory manner, we kind of laughed when we first got on board and right, he said, so what exactly do they do with it? And I thought that was a great question. He asked that question during dinner one night. I don't know if you were there or not. We kind of laughed. But is there an appetite for, I don't know, not that more stuff to our plate, for you to go to some of these board meetings and say, hey, this is what we do, this is what your folks do? Because I know, you know, we get some updates. So that was really good about that. But with CBTA, folks, colleges are very familiar now with what CBTA is supposed to be doing, and I don't think they realize that we've been here a long time. We've been doing a lot of stuff, and so I just wondered if that was part of that component, not to add something to anybody's plate, but for us to go out to these other boards and say, hey, this is what we do. Here's what we're doing for the localities. Is there an appetite for that? Not to add anything to that. And was that part of your plan there as well?
I think there's a really good addition to the plan. Right now, our interaction with each of the 9 jurisdictions is pretty varied.
Sure.
You know, I have regular standing meetings with some of our local government administrators on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. With others, it's less frequent. With some of the jurisdictions, I do. Hanover is one that I'll give an example. I typically am invited to come and do a little briefing once a year. That did not happen this past year because of the pandemic. But I'll say, for example, I do interact with the Charles City County Board of Supervisors annually, but it was during their budget process when I'm asking them for money.
Yeah.
So I think to your point, it would be nice if there's willingness. I mean, I would be very happy to come to any Board of Supervisors meeting or committee meeting or whatever would be most appropriate for. I think the last time I came to the Peacock County Board of Supervisors, Mrs. Page might not have been on the board. And it might have been when I was hired and it was an introductory meeting. So,
And some of that is because the commissioners go back and they love and form
Absolutely.
their boards, but, you know, there's also times where people, you know, say, hey, you know, you've got that, you go ahead. Okay, it's just something I thought about. Again, not trying to have something on somebody's plate, but when these regional folks come in, whether it's, you know, tourism or VRP or whatever, it gives other folks a really good understanding of what's going on. I'd be willing to do that, but I think it would help. And the reason I bring that up, last thing I'll say, Mr. Chairman, is, you know, we had a sensitive situation last year internally. Noticed a lot of folks came in and said, hey, we'll help with that. I think the administrators and the chief executives were instrumental in that because they speak with you a lot. And they said, hey, we're willing to dedicate these resources and we're willing to understand, do that. And those who were familiar with the organization jumped in and dedicated their staff. And I think it'd be good not to talk about specifics, but to talk about this. We've been here a long time, and this has been a pretty successful organization. And sometimes you do have to ring your own bell so people know exactly what you're doing. I just think that's important.
Can I make a comment on this? I'm a little bit remiss after last week. We need to put Chet on our August agenda because we're doing that with PTA.
Right.
Same thing. And that's one of the things I talked about, but I've not talked to you yet as chairman or John. So
Okay. Well, there you go.
now you know.
So we just had a sidebar. These are public sidebars?
That's all right. And I'll just tack on and say that the discussion about our brand and how we as an organization are communicating our own value as a regional body is something that is ongoing, something we've been talking about with our engagement in the Public Engagement Committee, which, by the way, if anybody wants to join, please look at that. You know, this is, I think that's part of the whole conversation too. And so I appreciate those comments. Good. All right, so that'll come back to us, and then we'll just move on to the fiscal year 2022 schedule. Yes, sir.
I did have just one comment.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Actually, a question I found. So I believe the established financial team, that is internal as far as staff as well as the committee.
yeah, great. don't want to steal the thunder, but Mr. Holland has, I don't know, say agreed, agreed slash offered to serve the committee.
So we're working under a unique model right now.
Correct.
Is the goal for that model to continue, or is that what we're evaluating long-term goals?
I think that there is a scenario where the current model could continue, but there is another scenario where, having on staff dedicated resources to finance is likely the better course to go. A lot of this has to do with what, if any, role will PlanRVA play with the CBTA going forward. Obviously, there's a significant kind of component of that conversation that influences our staff capacity and the direction that we would go. I certainly don't want to overstaff if that conversation goes in another direction, and I definitely don't want to be understaffed if and when we're asked to step into maybe a larger role.
Those decisions are included in this.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, and it all compliments to Mr. Van Dornick. I mean, I think that the situation's going quite well, but I'm not sure that that's we need to be ready to scale if and when needed.
And then the other thing I say, obviously, I'm a big fan of this. I would encourage you as you're going through, I see it for some, but when you talk about, how do you know if you achieved your goals? What are your success metrics for this? And you mentioned potentially using this as sort of a guide towards your annual performance, knowing how you got there. Number one, most importantly, so we can celebrate. That's the thing we're always on the next thing, we're always on the next thing. But staff and we're working and doing some great stuff. We need to be able to pause and celebrate those things. So we need to know where our milestones are.
Yes. So, first, thank you for this. I think this is really great. I'm particularly interested in imperative 4. I think that PlanRVA has a unique role to play. I think affordable housing is just one example of regional kinds of needs that I think PlanRVA is uniquely positioned to be able to facilitate and to convene the table. And so I really look forward to more discussion. I think there's some things pre-pandemic, but certainly pandemic that we could explore and look at and being convened on. So, let's see what else.
This is a meaty sandwich. There's a lot of good stuff in here. So, any other comments before we move to the schedule?
This is great.
We're gonna be quiet. All right, very good. Fiscal year 22.
Yes, so included also in the packet is a proposed schedule for you. This is also included in the full commission packet. This is a suggestion. It follows the normal, I don't know how long we've been meeting on the second Thursday of the month at 8:15 to 9 a.m., but that's here. I did, I know that this has been a topic in the past and it's been difficult, so I did want to sort of ask, do the members of this executive committee have the ability to meet even maybe at 8 o'clock? As you know, we are often running right up against that 8:57, 9 o'clock time. And I am conscious that also it might be beneficial if this executive committee could be in another room so that when commissioners come, they can actually gather and do their mingling and do what they like to do with coming early. But I know 8 o'clock is 8:15 is a difficult time. So that's one question for you. The next is I've tried to put out and work with Mr. Winslow on sort of a flow of meetings. I think he's going to have more to say about some content for meetings coming back in this fiscal year, but this generally follows the second Thursday of the month. I'll note that the recommendation would be that we cancel the full commission meeting in August. That has been a typical practice in normal years, not last year, but normal years. And then if you are available, my thought was maybe you could capture that time for this work session with the basketball team on the space planning. November is actually a state holiday. The 11th is the Veterans Day holiday. More than happy to look at choosing an alternate date for that month. But as you know, it does get challenging, especially in November with a lot of the other events that many of you attend. I think we typically run into problems in November with the Retail Merchants Association, big breakfast meeting, and then taking their sports backers event, I think. January also, yeah, there's a lot happening. January also is typically a difficult month, just because many of the localities are doing their organizational meetings, and sometimes we're not quite sure who's coming back to the commission. And so have proposed that as a canceled meeting as well. All of these are sort of open to your recommendation. And then in talking with Mr. Winslow, we did say, if the executive committee needed to convene in those months of cancel, maybe we sort of reserve that right to call special meetings if necessary. This, frankly, I think it helps everybody with scheduling, but it also just sort of helps me to make sure that our agenda items are flowing. Obviously, we need to make sure that the audit comes before the board in the right sequence, the budget, those kinds of really critical action items. And the rest, I think we're pretty flexible to fit in the schedule.
Comments?
So, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else is scheduled. But right about now, I'm good with this. I can meet at 8 o'clock. Traffic wise, it's probably better for me to be here. And I go to all the council meetings. And the other thing is, I'm getting so many notices that I'm confused.
Second.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm so confused.
I've got six on my calendar for today, and I don't know where they're coming from, but I've got for these two meetings, calendar invites.
I'm good. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I know we're not cutting down trees, but I'm so confused. So I look at them and it's like, which one, can I delete one? I know some of it is because of the Zoom meeting,
Yeah.
I understand that, but I gotta tell you, and it's not just PlanRVA, it's CDTA, and then you put TP on top of it, and it's like, oh my God. So what can I delete, what can I keep, what can I delete? And then, I always delete the wrong thing, me. So I'm deleting the wrong thing, so I'm keeping the Zoom meeting, so now I don't have the material that I need.
Understood.
So we could
We'll
just,
work on that.
yeah, if y'all could just help me out a little bit with that, I'm fine.
Yeah, I prefer early, but I can work with this if this is the role of the. Oh, yes, absolutely. Good with it.
Anybody not that they need to be, we decided to move the 10 minutes.
Let's just change the schedule, this 9 AM to noon for executive.
We're gonna have a couple of marathon sessions, but,
Yeah. I think that, so.
Yeah, I'll confirm with
We'll get there, right? Thank you. And we'll get to 2022 on here as well.
Oh,
Mr. Davis called that
thank
one.
you.
So,
I'm sorry.
we're gonna work this out. That's why this is a draft. Right.
Just-
Very good. All right.
So, Mr. Chair, are we going with the 9 or the 8 or what?
I mean, is there any objection to any of these canceled meetings right now? Anybody ready? Want to take a minute and look at the calendar with the clerk? I mean, I don't know. I know calendaring is done differently in different jurisdictions. I mean, it sounds like you only manage your own. And everything goes through Sarah on our board. So I want to take a look at this. Or you good for right now? If we need to change something, we can change.
On my calendar, so I will.
Okay. And we'll look at that calendar invite situation too. Just take a look at it.
Yeah, it seemed like when Zoom came up, that's when it came up like that. And I understand. But
There's the invite, and the email reminding you of the invite. So you have to keep emails and invites. Makes me busy.
Well, that's a similar issue, but I'm not, no, but I think it had something to do with some updates from some companies too. So I can show you from my phone exactly, I updated my phone with one of the newer versions, but we use Outlook, and this organization uses Outlook, However, for reasons I'll never understand, the Google company that made this phone for me, the Outlook doesn't work properly. And so I get all the Outlook updates directly to my phone from Liberty University, where I recently graduated, but I don't get anything directly on my phone from any other Outlook program. And even though I tried to update it, tried to fix it, I have to physically go into Outlook, physically look at the calendar. And so what happens is, if I say RSVP yes, it goes into Outlook, it doesn't go into my phone's Google Calendar. And that becomes very problematic because then I lose it. And someone says, oh, well, it was in your calendar. And I have to remember to go physically into my Outlook calendar, which is on my phone. But I don't know, that's not a PlanRVA thing. That's
It's an Outlook. You can only have one government Outlook account per device.
Google doesn't have that issue.
No.
But Outlook does. And that's a recent thing.
No, this is,
I
that's
think,
not my
I think.
problem.
Oh,
a lot
well,
of different
no,
issues
that's not my
we'll try to work on.
But I'm cool. I mean, I'm not criticizing,
No,
I'm
I
just
got
saying,
it.
you know,
I-
I just want you to know.
Yesterday in particular was a big day.
Because at least you make sure I'm here, so hey.
Can we get a motion to approve in the fiscal year 2022 plan, RVA executive committee meetings? And the fiscal year 2022 plan, RVA regional commission schedule for approval.
Second, McGraw.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Right. Next item is committee appointments. So this is again an information item. And I'll turn it over to Mark very quickly as we wrap up. And get ready for our board meeting.
Thank you. So we did have a discussion at the last finance committee meeting. I think the members indicated to Mr. Holland that they would be pleased if we would be willing to serve again as chair. We have members here, so, but I think that, I have not heard from any member that they would like to step down from that finance committee. So I shared with Mr. Winslow that, with concurrence of these members, Mr. Holland, Dr. Newgill, I don't know if you want to continue or you want to think about that. Mrs. O'Bannon, Mrs. Page, I want to be respectful of your calendar and time.
If we can put the treasure on there.
We have recommended. that-
I would agree.
And Mr. Peterson, I think I hadn't heard that you were a no.
No, I indicated that I would do it on Holland State Chair.
I think that's right. Yes. And then, of course, Mr. Winslow would be next this year. So we do have a nice, good slate there. You know, I think there has been a desire to want to make sure that we have representation from frankly, from an investment perspective of our larger jurisdictions, but also to make sure that we have that balance to make sure our smaller jurisdictions are represented as well. So we can probably work with Dr. Nichol to sort of figure out what makes most sense. And if based on this, then I would say Mrs. Page would step away from the finance committee and Mr. Riley is free to serve.
I got one.
See, that's how we hand it on.
And then I'm so glad that this report has great timing because Mr. Davey has agreed to continue to chair the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee. But he is a lone committee of just he and Mr. Thornton. So I do think, provided Mr. Thornton is willing to continue to serve in that committee, I think that there is a desire to try to generate some more interest. And so that announcement probably will be made
September.
So we will, in order to sort of function, we will operate with that list for finance committee, but I think the plan will be that we will memorialize the committee appointments at the September.
Thank you, Martha. That sounds good. If anybody knows that they want to be involved in these committees, obviously, the same ask. But anybody, anything else for the good of the body? All right, we're adjourned until 9 o'clock.
There's some more. I live 2.5 miles from my words. I'm not used to that. And I used to live in Richmond. I used to live in Rhinebeck. I used to be very used to but being out of Hannaford and living, I just go I go one road. That's it. And it's 2.5 miles. And so when I was coming here, I forgot
All roads.
Okay.